Hello guys, hola muchachos, buenos días, buenas tardes, or buenas noches, depending on at what time you're watching the video. And now you know what those mean, right? So this sixth video uh, focuses on something very basic in Spanish, but extremely important. It's called discurso formal e informal, or in English, formal and informal discourse. Don't let the rather technical title confuse you. Basically, we're just going to look at two forms that exist in Spanish for addressing people, meaning for talking to them. Okay? It's very simple. One of them is tú. Tú. Notice that it has an accent in the u, so it goes tú. That syllable is very strong. And then the other one is usted. Usted. The thing is, both of these mean the same thing when you translate them into English. They mean you. Not you as in you guys, no, that's a different one. You when you're addressing one person, when you're talking to one person, you can say it one of two ways. You can call this person tú, or you can call them usted. So what is the difference? It has to do with the type of relationship you have with this person or the lack thereof, okay? Tú is the informal way of talking to a person. So basically, in Spanish speaking countries, you use this form for people you're familiar with, people you have a special affection for, or people you want to be close to, right? Or people with whom you want to act informal, okay? This might sound rather vague, but the idea is that tú signals that you feel you have familiarity with this person or that you want to have familiarity with them. Usted, on the other hand, is used typically for strangers and for people you want to treat with special respect and for people you want to establish a distance with, okay? Tú is informal. It means we're close or I want us to be close. Usted is formal and it means we're distant or I want us to be distant. Of course, close and distant can be interpreted in many different ways, right? So let's look at some specific cases. Remember, both tú and usted mean you, right? So it's the way that you would address somebody, the way that you would talk to somebody, right? How are you? You would use either of these. You would use tú or usted, right? So let's think about this for a minute. For example, with your strict math professor, right? The guy that is always very serious, always wearing a tie. He is very strict about deadlines, he never laughs. Would you use tú or usted? Do you want to be informal with this person? Do you want to be formal with them? Think about it for a second. Tú or usted? Usted, right? The guy is a strict professor, so you want to show respect because you know that otherwise you might get in trouble. Another case, a stranger who asks you for directions. You're walking down the street, right? He asks you where's, I don't know, the Empire State Building in Spanish. You want to answer, right? Tú or usted? Do you want to be formal with this person or informal? Well, I would say usted. We just said that usted is the one you use with strangers typically, right? Because it would feel a little strange if out of nowhere you're using tú with a stranger, okay? How about your little brother? What do you think? Formal or informal? Tú or usted? I would say tú, right? Not just your brother, but your little brother, right? So Also, age sometimes has to do with whether you use tú or usted, right? I would say tú in this case. Another case with a stranger. This is another stranger, but it's a very different situation. It's not someone walking down the street asking for directions. It's someone in a bar and you want to hit on them, okay? You think they're sexy, you want to hit on this person. Tú or usted? What do you think? Well, in this case, you do use tú, right? If you use tú with a stranger, typically it signals that you want to be close to them, right? So if in this context, in a bar, everybody having drinks and you approach them at the bar and you start talking to them, if you use tú, it sends a signal, right? I like you. Okay. Your pet. How would you address your pet? Formally or informally? Well, I guess you can play around and address them formally, but typically you would say tú, right? Typically you would be informal with this. And how about a stranger who just insulted you? I would say usted, because this establishes a distance, right? You're not gonna feel close to someone who just, treated you badly on the street, right? So typically you would go usted. This is not an exact science, okay? I'm giving you very general examples, but many things also depend on where a certain Spanish speaker comes from, right? And also the type of relationship that they have with people. For example, in some Latino families, grandparents are very respected. So even when, a grandson or a granddaughter is close to their grandma, in these types of families, they would not say tú to the grandma because the grandma would be offended, right? It's a type of family in which there's a lot of respect for elders. That's not my case. Not that we don't respect our elders, but there's not this formality, right? I say tú to my grandma. Um, Also between parents and children, right? In some families, the relationship is very formal with your mother or your father, right? Again, not my case. I would say tú to my mom all the time, and also to my dad. Hmm? But in some families, they sort of keep this distance, right? And also, depending on the country, some people tend to be more informal than others. As a personal anecdote, I hope not to bore you with this one, but I'm a Spanish speaker, but I lived until I was 25 in Colombia, had never left the country. Then I came to the US and I came to New York City. And of course, in New York City, there's a lot of Spanish speakers, right? But they're from all over the place. And I'm from Bogota. It's a city in the center of Colombia in which we tend to be very formal. So I don't feel comfortable saying tú to a stranger. Okay? I feel it's weird. That's not the case with most Spanish speakers in New York City, right? The grocer you just met goes tú on you, right? The guy that came to fix your appliances, the guy you just met on the street and is asking for directions, everybody goes tú, right? People from Mexico, people from the Caribbean. So um, this to me is still a little jarring, but it is because I grew up in a different environment. Even though it's Spanish, as primary language, there are still certain cultural differences between Spanish speakers, right? So this is not an exact science, but the important, really important things that you remember. That usted is for being formal to someone, and tú is for being informal. Okay? So let's look at some useful expressions that we're going to use a lot in these first weeks of the semester for talking to people that have both a formal and informal version. Okay? That have a tú form and an usted form. For example, let's look at this little table at the first row. How are you? How do you say that in Spanish? There are two options. You can say, ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo estás? That means how are you? Or you can say, ¿Cómo está? ¿Cómo está? both of these, ¿cómo estás? And ¿cómo está? Mean, how are you? What is the difference? ¿Cómo estás? Is informal. ¿Cómo está? Is formal, right? ¿Cómo estás? Is the tú form. ¿Cómo está? Is the usted form. Another is very useful for when you're meeting someone. Where are you from? You can say either ¿de dónde eres? ¿De dónde eres? Or ¿de dónde es? ¿De dónde es? Both of those mean where are you from, but ¿de dónde eres is informal. ¿De dónde es is formal. How about what's your name? Very useful when you just met somebody, right? Well, ¿cómo te llamas? ¿Cómo te llamas? That's the informal version. ¿Cómo se llama? ¿Cómo se llama? That is the formal version. The last one, how old are you? Very useful as well. There's an informal version. ¿Cuántos años tienes? ¿Cuántos años tienes? That's how old are you when it's informal. ¿Cuántos años tiene? ¿Cuántos años tiene? That is formal. So please learn these four expressions. They're very, very useful for that moment of first contact with someone in Spanish, and learn which one is formal and which one is informal. Okay? Thank you. Gracias. Hasta luego.